Russian President Vladimir Putin thought that Crimea would be the key to winning the war he started against Ukraine. Now, it's turning into one of Russia's biggest weaknesses. Strike after strike has seen Ukraine minimize the impact Crimea can have on the mainland. And now, Ukraine is hitting the Russian-occupied peninsula harder than ever before. The Russians thought they were safe in Crimea. Ukraine just proved them dead wrong with an attack that has crippled Russian air power on the peninsula. On August 4th, the Kyiv Independent reported that Ukraine's security service, or SBU, has announced an overnight strike against an airfield in the Crimean city of Saky. The airfield itself was not the main target, though any additional damage done would be a bonus for Ukraine. Instead, Ukraine wanted to hit the aircraft that called the Saky Airfield home, the very aircraft that Russia has been using to launch bombs and missiles into the Black Sea. Ukraine just hit 5 of those aircraft. That's according to the official SBU Telegram channel, which reported the strike hours before the Kyiv Independent published its report. New SBU Special Operation. Service drones hit 5 Russian fighter jets at Saky Airfield. 1 aircraft completely destroyed, the announcement blared, giving us an instant indication of what Ukraine has managed to pull off. This night, drones of the SBU Central Operational Command A visited the Saky military airfield in temporarily occupied Crimea. It's a key Russian airbase for operations in the Black Sea, the SBU added. The same Telegram post rattles off the damage that the SBU managed to cause in a single strike. Among the targeted aircraft were a pair of Su-30SMs. One had been damaged, the other completely destroyed. The SBU also says that it managed to hit a trio of Su-24 jets, though it's unclear how extensive the damage done to those aircraft is, or whether they'll be prevented from flying in the future. Adding to the list of targets was an aviation weapons depot, which likely contained the bombs and missiles these jets have been firing at Ukraine. So even if some of the aircraft have survived to fight another day, they no longer have access to the weapons Putin needs them to have to cause damage to Ukraine. This was a big win for Ukraine. It was also a massive loss for Russia. The SBU explains that every Su-30SM costs Russia between $35 and $50 million. We know that one of those aircraft has been destroyed, and with the Su-24s, we don't know the extent of the damage done to the second. If hit hard enough, that jet may not be able to receive the repairs it needs to take it back to the skies, meaning Ukraine has potentially cost Russia at least $100 million with a single strike. The successful SBU operation in Saky is another step towards weakening the enemy's ability to wage an aggressive war against Ukraine, the SBU said when signing off their Telegram post. The occupiers must remember that they will never feel safe on our land. Euromaidan Press provides some more details in its report on Ukraine's devastating strike. It notes that the Saky base is located around 43 to 50 miles away from Ukrainian territory, making it a prime choice for Putin's missiles and bombing campaigns. Of particular note are Russia's glide bombs. Created by attaching special wing kits to Russia's Soviet-era Fab bombs. Glide bombs are launched from Russian air bases and glide to their targets thanks to their wings. Putin loves his glide bombs. Each wing kit costs between $20,000 and $30,000, making the bombs cheap and easy to make. Tens of thousands have already been launched at Ukraine, and Putin has also ordered the creation of 75,000 more in 2025, as part of a plan to pump up Russian glide bomb production by 50%. With a little luck, Ukraine has just managed to take out an ammunition depot that stored these dreadful Russian weapons. We know for certain that it's decimated at least 1 aircraft capable of launching glide bombs. Russia hasn't officially confirmed what just happened in Saky, the Kyiv Independent reports. What we see with this Crimean strike is Ukraine building on its recent successes. Once again, using drones, Ukraine has managed to take out a key part of Russia's aerial power with a low-risk, high-reward strategy. Drones costing tens of thousands of dollars have been used to take out aircraft worth tens of millions. And it's far from the first time Ukraine has managed to pull off something like this. Of course, there was the brilliant Operation Spiderweb, which saw Ukraine sneak a horde of drones into Russia on the back of trucks before unleashing them against 4 key Russian airfields. That strike reportedly damaged 41 aircraft, the Kyiv Independent points out, including some of Russia's key nuclear bombers. You can learn everything you need to know about that strike in our video. Ukraine has also conducted several successful strikes against Russian air defenses in Crimea and has taken out about a third of the once dreaded Black Sea fleet that used to call Crimea home before Ukraine forced it to withdraw. Again, drones have been a key part of this strategy, as Ukraine consistently uses its unmanned aerial and seaborne vehicles to hit Russia hard. The August 4th strike was just the latest of many. Just as the SBU said, it serves as a reminder to Putin and his people that they are never safe from Ukraine's vengeance, especially when they're inside the territory that they've illegally occupied. Let's zero in on the aircraft the SBU says it destroyed in the Saky strike, the Su-30SM. You already know the basics. A single Su-30SM costs Russia up to $50 million to build, and Putin has been using them to launch missiles and glide bombs from the Saky airbase into Ukraine. But there's more to this jet than just its ability to hover over a base and launch bombs. If Russia has any sort of ability to make use of its overwhelming air force, the Su-30SM will be one of its key weapons. Codenamed the Flanker C by NATO, the Su-30SM is a twin-engine, multi-role fighter jet that's capable of operating in all weather conditions and can engage in both air-to-air and air-to-surface operations. The jet is among Russia's most modern, having been introduced into the Russian military in 1996, and it's an absolute beast of aerial power. Its twin turbofan engines can produce 27,550 pounds of afterburning thrust, allowing the jet to reach top speeds of Mach 2 in level flight, says Army Recognition. Though that speed falls when flying at low altitudes, which is something Ukraine's air defenses have taken advantage of during the few times that Putin has deployed Su-30SMs in Ukraine, it's still a rapid jet that also carries enough internal fuel to fly for 1,864 miles before needing to refuel. Of course, none of that really matters when Russia is just using the jet to hover over a Crimean airbase as it launches munitions at Ukraine. What does matter is the Su-30SM's loadout. We've mentioned that it's capable of launching glide bombs already. Beyond these devastatingly powerful weapons, the jet comes loaded with a 30mm GSH-301 gun, along with 150 rounds. It also has 12 external stations for weapon storage. Along with bombs, an Su-30SM can be loaded with rocket packs and air-to-air missiles, the latter category including Russia's RWAE, R-73E, and R-27ETS, depending on the mission requirements. Long-range missiles with TV command guidance can be loaded for striking ground targets, and thanks to compatibility with the Raduga 3M80E, Russia even has the option of using its Su-30SMs to take out ships. Make no mistake, the Su-30SM is a versatile aircraft. And Russia has been reduced to using it to do little more than launch missiles and glide bombs from a safe distance, or more accurately, what it thought was a safe distance before Ukraine's drones came raining down on Saky Airfield. It gets worse for Putin. Ukraine has only confirmed that it has destroyed a single Su-30SM. That would be the best outcome of a bad situation for Russia, and the other 4 aircraft Ukraine hit have only been damaged. Except the Saky airbase strike may have done more damage to Russia's aerial might than Putin will want to admit. Why? It may not be able to get the damaged aircraft back into the skies even if they're repairable. We know that because Russia is really struggling to build warplanes right now, as its industrial base creaks under the weight of the sanctions imposed against it by Ukraine's Western partners. That's according to Newsweek, which wrote on July 3rd that a combination of sanctions limiting access to key components and Russia's growing labor shortage are preventing it from building new planes. The situation is so bad that Russia's inability to build planes is even extending to its commercial sector. Simple Flying says that the country is being forced to turn to Africa, specifically Ethiopian Airlines, to source new jets for its carriers to use commercially. All of this matters for a simple reason. Russia's plane-building problems means it's unlikely that it's going to be able to replace what it lost on July 4th. Sure, Putin might be able to order more Su-30SMs and Su-24s to head to the Saky base after the strike, but that means pulling those aircraft away from other bases, creating weaknesses elsewhere. Whether it's Crimea or another base, Ukraine has just managed to relieve the pressure Putin was placing on it with his aerial strikes, and that assumes that Putin wants to send replacement jets to Saky. After all, Ukraine just showed it can hit it once. Nothing is stopping a new horde of Ukrainian drones from hitting Saky again in the future. That brings us to another thing that Ukraine achieved on August 4th. Beyond taking out 5 Russian aircraft, Ukraine may have just made the Saky airbase unusable for Russia. That will be a big shot for Putin. The Saky Airfield was built in the 1930s during the early years of the Soviet Union, and it's been one of the most important Crimean bases ever since. Right now, it's home to Russia's 43rd Independent Naval Assault Aviation Regiment, which uses the jets we've already mentioned to launch missile and glide bomb attacks against Ukraine. But that's not the only reason why Saky is important. It's also a training ground for Russian pilots. The Conflict and Environment Observatory says that Saky is used as both a patrol and training base for Russia's Navy pilots, making it vital to Russia's Black Sea operations. After all, pilots need to learn how to fly, especially given that Russia has had a pilot problem since as far back as May 2023. That's when the former Ukrainian Air Force spokesman Yuri Inat discussed a serious issue with Russia's piloting situation. Russia continues to train pilots. Training centers are operating. In terms of the number of pilots graduating, it's around 100 to 150 individuals each year, Pravda reported Inat as saying in May 2023. On the surface, that seems like a very bad thing. Putin's air force has lost a lot of pilots. Ukraine's Ministry of Finance says Ukraine has destroyed 421 Russian planes and 340 helicopters as of August 4th, with most of those losses taking their pilots with them. Initially, Inat's comments make it seem like Russia has a pipeline of new pilots to replace those that it's losing, but that isn't the case. Obviously, we aren't putting a lot of hope into Russia running out of pilots, Inat said in May 2023. But it's obvious that the quality of the Russian personnel will diminish. This is war. That diminishing quality is Putin's problem. The pilots Russia is fielding now have been rushed through their training and aren't anywhere near as experienced as Russia needs them to be. Think about what it means that Ukraine has proven it can strike a pilot training ground. Now Putin can't risk sending new pilots into Saky. If he does, those pilots may become victims of future Ukrainian drone strikes, perhaps meaning that Russia will struggle to field even poorly trained pilots as its aerial situation grows ever more desperate. Putin knew that Saky was vulnerable to Ukrainian strikes. In December 2024, Crimea platform reported that Russia was rapidly constructing a series of new defenses at the airfield as a response to Ukraine carrying out several successful drone assaults on Russia's military aviation presence on the Crimean Peninsula. A military partisan movement named Artesh gathered data on the new defenses, which included aircraft, radars, and new air defense systems. Perhaps Ukraine sat on this information for months before launching its August 4th strike. Regardless, we now know that the Saky defenses aren't up to the job. Ukraine's drones still managed to penetrate in large enough numbers to strike 5 aircraft and an ammunition storage unit. Millions of dollars worth of Russia's equipment failed to stop Ukraine's drones, as we've seen so many times during the war. Putin may have lost more than a few aircraft. He and Russia's trainee pilots may have lost their trust in Saky as a safe airfield where pilots can be trained and attacks against Ukraine can be launched. That brings us to the long-term implications of the Saky strike. Beyond potentially taking a key Russian airfield offline, albeit through fear of future strikes rather than direct damage, Ukraine also achieved several key objectives on August 4th. The first of those objectives, it cost Russia a lot of money. Let's assume that Russia won't be able to get any of the aircraft Ukraine struck back into the air. The loss of the 2 Su-30SMs burns a $100 million hole into Russia's bank balance. But Su-24s aren't cheap either. Just one of those aircraft sells for about $25 million on the export market, Aero Corner reports. Russia will spend less than that to build Su-24s, of course, but these are still multi-million-dollar pieces of machinery that Ukraine may have just taken out with its drones. Russia can't afford to be suffering these types of losses. Russia is already on pace to run out of its financial reserves by the end of 2025, Business Insider said back in May. Those reserves are down to $31 billion from a pre-war high point of $117 billion. Showing us that Putin has been dipping deep into Russia's rainy day fund to keep his war going. Russia is also bringing in less money than it did before Putin's invasion. The Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air says that Russia pulled in 5% less revenue from its fossil fuels in 2024 than it did in 2023. In June, Reuters reports, crude oil and oil product revenues dropped by 14% compared to the same month in 2024. What we see here is a downward trend that has placed Russia on a financial precipice. Losing at least $50 million of equipment and potentially much more isn't going to help matters for Putin. Another key long-term effect of Ukraine's August 4th strike on Saky is that it minimizes Russia's ability to launch long-range strikes against Ukraine. We've just seen how effective Saky can be in this department before. In April 2024, TVP World reported that one overnight strike on 5 Ukrainian regions saw Russia launch 87 drones and 8 missiles from occupied Crimea, including a trio of Iskander ballistic missiles and 2 anti-ship missiles. Saky was a launching ground for these types of strikes thanks to the types of aircraft stationed at the base. Now, it may no longer be useful to Russia. This doesn't mean that Putin's aerial assaults will stop. Russia has many more air bases, especially on the Russian mainland, that will continue to pelt Ukraine with drones, missiles and bombs, regardless of what happened to Saky. But remember what we told you about Saky before. It's less than 50 miles away from Ukraine. The August 4th strike will at least relieve pressure, even if just temporarily, on the regions of Ukraine that are within Saky's range. There's also a logistical component to the attack that needs to be considered. Euromaidan Press points out that the August 4th operation was yet another successful Ukrainian strike against Russia's logistical operation and combat capabilities in Crimea. The Independent outlined just how crucial Crimea as a whole has been to Russia's ability to sustain its invasion for 3.5 years. Control over Crimea is supposed to amount to control over both the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, the Independent says. That hasn't proven to be the case thanks to Ukraine's Black Sea drone and missile strikes, but it highlights how Crimea's position makes it usable as an entry point into Ukraine. Putin has used the peninsula as a logistics hub, building a bridge to the Russian mainland to supply the forces he has crammed into the arid region, the Independent adds. And therein lies the problem for Ukraine. The supplies that enter Crimea via Russia go to all sorts of places. They're shipped onto the Ukrainian mainland to sustain Russia's ground forces. They also go to places like the Saky Airbase, which would have received regular shipments of bombs and missiles for its aircraft to launch. Ukraine needs to shut down that logistical artery. The August 4th strike on Saky won't do that, but it takes Ukraine another step closer to forcing Putin to lose control over one of his key logistical hubs. Speaking about moving one step closer, the Saky strike may have just moved Ukraine slightly closer to a goal that it's had ever since Russian forces illegally annexed Crimea in 2014, taking the peninsula back. To this day, Ukraine has never come close to acknowledging Russia's occupation of Crimea as legitimate. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has even pointed out that it would be impossible for him to do so even if he wanted. "There's nothing to talk about here. This is against our constitution," the BBC reports Zelensky is saying. In other words, Ukraine's constitution recognizes Crimea as Ukrainian territory, as do the majority of countries, so there is no chance that Ukraine will ever hand it over. Still, retaking Crimea, is that even possible? It may just be, and strikes like those against Russian aircraft in Saky could be part of the plan to return Crimea to Ukraine. Dwindling resources, Black Sea setbacks, vulnerable supply lines, and the increasingly intelligent use of drones could help Ukraine to do what they said could never be done: force Russia out of Crimea. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show if you want more up-to-date coverage of Ukraine's latest strikes against Putin's war machine. And thank you as always for watching.